Hello, welcome to knowledgescavenger.com. This lesson is the basics of Windows 8. For those not quite familiar with my voice yet, my name is Nathan and I'll be your instructor for this lesson. So what we're going to be covering in this lesson on the basics of Windows 8 is what I feel to be the essentials of what you need to know about Windows 8 in order to be comfortable in all of the future lessons that are going to be on this site involving Windows 8. Specifically, what we'll be learning about is the Start menu, which has changed quite a bit since older versions of Windows, the desktop, the taskbar, hot corners, which are a new feature in Windows 8, My Computer or Windows Explorer, as well as disks and partitions inside of Windows Explorer, libraries, control panel, programs or applications, specifically web browsers, and keyboard shortcuts, focusing on copying and pasting. So just up front, I just want to make clear that this is a fairly long lesson. When I started writing it, I got a bit carried away and I realized there was a fair amount of content, more than I initially thought. So if you're finding this lesson a bit long and you're finding it hard to concentrate, or you feel like you're getting overwhelmed, just pause the video, take a break, come back to it whenever you're ready. The content itself isn't too difficult, so you shouldn't really have too much of a feeling like you're getting overwhelmed. But if you do, just take a break, come back to it when you're ready. So there may be some questions that some of you out there are asking. What if I'm using Windows 7? Well, if you're using Windows 7, there's already a lesson on the knowledgescavenger.com website about Windows 7 covering all the basics of that operating system. So head over to knowledgescavenger.com and check out that lesson instead. If you're asking what am I using, what if I'm using something besides Windows 7 or Windows 8? Well, check out the introduction. The introduction video, I talk about why I won't be covering other operating systems outside of Windows 7 and Windows 8. So all your questions will be answered there. So before we get into the lesson proper, there's some vocabulary that I just want to cover. These are some words that are going to be thrown around a fair bit throughout the lessons that may be a bit confusing if you've never heard them before. So I just wanted to go over each one and give a brief definition so that you can keep them in the back of your mind when I do throw those words around, you have an idea of what I'm talking about. When we get into the lesson proper, you'll start to sort of understand what a lot of these words mean before, if you've never actually heard them used before. First up, we have operating system. Windows 8 is an operating system. Operating systems are basically the lowest level piece of software on your computer. So every other piece of software or application on your computer, in order for it to run, it needs an operating system to sit on, basically, to tell it how to run and what to do. It's a fairly advanced concept, so I can't really cover it in a lot of depth in this lesson. But all you really need to know is if someone asks you what operating system are you using, then they're asking you what version of Windows you're using. So if you're at this lesson, then I would assume that you're using Windows 8. Next up, we have icons. Icons, they're the symbols on your screen that represent your programs or your files. So when you go to open your web browser, or if you go to open musics or pictures that you want to view, normally there's going to be a picture on your screen that you would double click on, and when you double click on that picture, it's going to open up the actual program or the song or the picture for you to use. So those little pictures that you're clicking on and interacting with, those are called icons. Interface. Interface is a fancy term for the point of interaction between you and your computer. So everything on your computer screen that you can interact with in some way, or that allows you to perform some function on your computer, is part of the interface. The Start menu is the main menu inside of Windows. It's the gateway for everything else on your computer. The reason that it's called the Start menu is because back in the olden days of Windows, when you would start up your computer, it would be the first place that you'd go to access everything else on your computer. Nowadays in Windows 8, the start menu, once again, is the first thing that pops up on your screen. So it really is performing up to its name, and it is basically the start of your computer. The desktop is the main part of your computer where you're going to be accessing all your work from. So although when you start up your computer you're going to be given the start screen, most people are going to be doing all their work from the desktop. Typically people put icons or files that they're going to be accessing often on their desktop, and they work from there. Now you may have also heard of desktop used in another way, in the term of desktop computer, and that simply it means that's a computer that's been designed to sit on your desk or on top of your desk. Disks or partitions, in the simplest terms, those are the storage devices that you're going to see listed under the computer section of Windows Explorer. Now there's a whole section dedicated to disks and partitions and what it all means. So if you're confused by that one, don't worry too much for now. You'll understand it a lot more once you get to that section of the lesson. The taskbar is the bar that runs along the bottom of your screen. Normally, it can be moved to any of the other sides of your screen. The bar, it's got icons on it for programs that you have running, and it's also got your system tray, which will be explained in the next definition, and it also has its own section dedicated to it. So the system tray, that's the thing on the right hand side of the taskbar. It's got your clock and it's got a bunch of other icons that you've probably always wondered what they were, why they're there, and what they do. Well, yeah, as I said before, system tray will be covered in its own section. Finally, we've got window. So the box that an application or program opens in is called a window, and it's basically what Windows is named for. Pretty much everything that you open on your computer is going to open inside its own window. You'll sort of see how this all works once we start going over it a bit more in the lesson, but that's basically the end of the vocabulary. So now we can get onto the lesson proper, and we can actually bring up a computer for you guys to look at, and we can continue the lesson. Alright, so when you first log into your computer, what you're gonna come up to is the start menu, which is this screen here. So depending on how long you've been using your computer, you might have a lot more sort of stuff going on your screen, but this is basically it. If you've ever used Windows 7 or any of the older versions of Windows, you may notice that the start menu is very, very, very different to all of the older versions of Windows. Well, for the start menu on the older operating systems, it was just a menu. With Windows 8, it's literally a whole screen. Now, you may have seen all these rectangle things sort of here on the start menu. These, when you click on any of them, they're going to open up any programs that they're associated to. So the Internet Explorer one will open Internet Explorer, the Mail one will open your mail, the weather one will open the weather, and yeah, that's pretty much how they sort of work. Now you may have noticed that some of these rectangles are constantly sort of updating with information and changing their screens. These rectangles, they're pretty cool. They're called live tiles, and yeah, what they'll do is basically get new information from the internet, and they'll update and give you a preview of sort of what's going on in the program without even having to open it. So the weather one will constantly update with the weather, and you can set different cities that you want to monitor, and it'll flick through all the cities and show you a live update of all the weather that's happening in those countries or cities. The travel one here will update with some new travel information that is on the 9MSN travel blog, I think. And then there's the sports one, which is the same thing but for sports, and all that sort of stuff. So I'm not going to go through all of these tiles and how they work, because the thing is, if you've been using your computer for a while, you'll probably have a whole bunch of different ones anyway. But there is one other thing that I wanted to one tile in particular that I wanted to cover, and that's the desktop tile, which is this one here. The desktop tile is important because when you click on it, it's going to bring up your desktop. we're going to be going to the desktop very shortly, so just keep that one in mind because you'll be using it a fair bit. There's just one other feature that I wanted to cover in the start menu itself before we move on, and that's using the search feature. So the search feature is really cool because when you're on the start menu, all you have to do is start typing something in. So for example, I'll type CALC and it will bring up the calculator. If you want to go back to the start menu itself, just hit the start button on your keyboard, which is usually located between the control and the alt keys on your keyboard, or if you're using a laptop, it might be located between FN and alt. There you go. Hit that button, brings you back to that screen. So now we're going to continue on to the desktop. As I said earlier, to get to the desktop, you just click on this desktop tile or rectangle right here. And here we are at the desktop. So welcome to the desktop. Get acquainted with it because you're going to be spending a lot of your time on your computer here. Now, there's two main parts to the desktop. The first one is your desktop background, which is this pretty picture of flowers that I have here, but on your computer it may be different. It may be a picture of a race car or cats or your boyfriend or girlfriend or whatever you really want to put there. The second one is the desktop icons. So because this is a pretty freshly built computer here, all I've got is a recycle bin, but over time as you install new programs on your computer and get new files and everything like that, you'll probably have a whole bunch of them all the way down the screen. Really, the desktop background is just there to, look pretty and to break up your desktop icons from the background itself. So that's pretty much the desktop in a nutshell. That's all you really need to know about it. But you will be spending a lot of time there. Now the next thing that I want to talk about is the taskbar. You may have noticed this blue bar, well it's blue for me, but it might be a different color for you, along the bottom of the screen. This is called the taskbar. Now as I said earlier, you can move it to the other sides of the screen, so for you it may be on the left, the right, or the top, but that's basically the taskbar. The taskbar, it's just designed to hold the icons for your open programs. So any programs that you open up or that you pin to the taskbar itself will be along the bottom of the screen, along the bottom of the bar here, and you can click on any of them to open the program up. The second part of the taskbar is the system tray. So on the right hand side over here where you've got your clock and you've got all these icons, that's what is called the system tray. So this system tray, it's got a bunch of icons for programs that are running in the background, so they don't actually require any interaction from you. If you click this arrow, it gives you all the other sort of icons in your taskbar that are hidden by default. Really, you probably won't need to be doing much with your taskbar unless I tell you otherwise. Sorry, with your system tray. But I just wanted you to be aware of where it is and what it's there for. Probably the most you'll be doing with the system tray is using the clock. Next up, I wanted to talk about a new feature of Windows 8, which is the hot corners. Now, the reason they're called hot corners is because you bring them up by putting your mouse in any of the four corners on your screen. So if you put your mouse in the top left or the bottom left corner of the screen, what you're going to bring up is the switch list. So the switch list is going to bring up a bunch of different programs that you've already got open. It'll bring up a preview of those programs, and then when you click on it, it will switch you over to that program. If you want to get back to the desktop, just hit the start button on your keyboard again and then click desktop. Same thing in the bottom corner here. The one in the bottom corner is always going to be the start menu first, and then it'll give you a list of all the other ones down the list. Now if you put your mouse in the top right or the bottom right corner of the screen, what you're going to bring up is the charms menu. Now the charms menu, it's got a bunch of different options here for controlling your computer. So you've got search, sharing, the start menu again, devices and settings. So I'm not going to go into too much detail about how all these options on the charm menus work, but I just want you to remember the settings one in particular, because you'll be using that settings one to access the control panel a little bit later. Alright, so next up what I wanted to talk about was computer or Windows Explorer, whatever you want to call it. So there's two ways that you can access it. One, if you've got this icon down here on your taskbar, you can just simply click on it and it will bring up the Windows Explorer window. The other way is if you open up your start menu again by either tapping the start button on your keyboard or going here and going to start, then you can start typing in Explorer. Now you should only need to type EX before you get something like this here. Then you can just click on File Explorer and it will open it up again. Once you've got this screen up on your screen, just click on Computer, because we're going to be focusing on this window in particular. So before I continue, I just want to point out there are a whole bunch of other ways to open Windows Explorer on your screen. Just like everything else on your computer, there's a million ways to do pretty much anything. But those are the two probably easiest ways that I think, and the two ways that I do it the most often. So I just wanted to show you those two ways. Now if you're looking at this window and you're confused by all the different information on the screen, don't worry, I'm going to make it a lot simpler just by breaking this window down into sections. I just want to point out that the section names that I'm going to be using, they're not official section names or anything like that. They're just names that I've given the sections to sort of make it easier to identify each section. Feel free to give them your own names or whatever you want to do. First up, I want to talk about this part at the top here. Everything, from here and above. This is what I like to call the navigation section. So if we go from left to right here, first up you've got the back and the forward buttons. Now if you've ever used back and forward buttons in your internet browser, you probably know how these work, because they work exactly the same way. The back button will take you back to any previous screen that you've been on, and the forward button will take you forward to where you just were if you've gone back. It's really as simple as that. Back and forward, back and forward. Over here we've got the address bar. Now the address bar, it's going to tell you the location of where you are on your computer currently. So right now we're on computer. If we were to go back, we'd be under libraries. And if you put your mouse in this bar and click, you can actually delete what's in there and then type in the name of somewhere that you want to go to, and it'll take you there. For example, if I type in C:, and hit enter, it's going to take me into this C local disk. Now I can just hit back and it'll take me back to the computer where I was before. That's pretty much how the address bar works. Over on the other end of the address bar, you've got this little drop down arrow. If you click on that, it's going to give you a list of previous locations that you've been to. So the only other location that I've been to is the C drive, so it's a pretty short list for me, but it may be a lot longer for you. Then next to that arrow, that drop down arrow, we've got this sort of other arrow that's chasing its own tail. This is the refresh button. If for some reason anything changes inside of whatever folder that you're on, but you don't see those changes on your screen, but you know that it should have changed, you hit that refresh button and it's going to refresh the window and update it with any new information since the last time you've refreshed the screen. To the right of that button, we've got the search box. So this search box works similar to the search function in the start menu, except instead of finding programs or whatnot that are on your computer, it's going to look for you through your computer for all the different files that match that search criteria. So if I was to type in CALC, the same as I did before on the start menu, you're going to get a whole bunch of other different files besides the calc one that you got on the start menu. So you're going to get all these different folders and files that have calc anywhere in the name or the description or anything like that. So if I want to go back to where I was, I can either hit the back button like we've been doing before, I can delete the text out that I've got typed in there, or I can hit this little X and it's going to cancel the search and it's going to take me back to where I was before I started searching. Now if we move up, we've got these three little symbols right here. These three symbols you're going to find on pretty much every single window or program that you open on your computer. The one on the left is called minimize. When you click that, it's going to minimize whatever window you have open down to the taskbar here. Now, as I was saying earlier, all the icons in your taskbar represent any programs that you have open. So if I was to click on that icon in the taskbar, it's going to bring that program up again. The one in the middle is the maximize button. So if minimize is going to completely hide the window that you've got open, what maximize is going to do is blow it up so that it's the main thing on the screen, so that it covers pretty much everything else. Now once you've already got a window maximized on the screen, the maximize button is going to change to the restore down button. When you click that, what it's going to do is restore the window to the size that it originally was before you maximized it. Now finally, on the right here, we've got the close button. There's a reason that it's in red, and that's because it's a warning. If you click on that button, what it's going to do is close whatever window or program you have down completely. So that means that if you haven't saved any files or whatever you were working on before you hit that close button, assuming that the program that you're working in doesn't give you a warning about saving, it's just going to close that program and you're going to lose whatever progress you had beforehand. So be careful before you click that. I'm going to click it now because I know that there's nothing that's really changed since I have been working in here. And as you see, the little highlight around the icon on this taskbar here has disappeared. I can just click on the File Explorer icon again and it's going to open it up, and I'll just go back to computer. Now the only other thing in the navigation section I wanted to talk about was these options over here where we've got File, Computer, View, and all these sort of little symbols up the top here. These are basically just a bunch of options that you're going to get depending on which screen you're in inside of Windows Explorer and depending on what you're clicking on. So those options are going to change depending on what you click on. So as you see, if I click on any of these, I'm going to get the Manage option. If I go back to Libraries and I click on any of these, I'm going to get the Manage option as well. If I was to click on a file, I'd probably get a completely different set of options. You don't really need to worry about these too much. You can play around with them yourself if you want, but I'm not going to cover them here. You probably won't be using them too much, and if you ever do need to use them in the future, I will cover them on an as-needed basis. So that's the navigation section covered. The next section that I wanted to talk about was the shortcut section, which is this section down the left-hand side here. So all of these symbols down the left-hand side here, or icons, are shortcuts to different places on your computer. So you've got a bunch of different headings here. You've got favorites, which has a bunch of favorites or favorite locations that you frequently visit. These are the default ones that Windows gives you, but you can add your own at any point in the future if you want to. And I'll include a link to a guide on how to do that in the additional reading section. I'm not going to cover it here. But as you see, if you click on desktop, it's going to bring up your desktop. If you click on downloads, it'll bring up the downloads folder, etc., etc. Libraries will cover in a bit more detail in its own section a little bit later on, but as you see in the shortcut section, you've also got shortcuts to all your libraries. You've got a shortcut to the computer, and you've got a shortcut to the network. That's pretty much how the shortcut section works. It's just a bunch of shortcuts. So the final section that I wanted to talk about is the big main section of the window, this section right here. This is the Explorer window, and it's where you're going to be spending most of your time when you've got Windows Explorer open. So the reason I call it the Explorer section is because it's where you do all your exploring. So if I click on C, it's going to give me a bunch of other folders, and then I can explore through those folders and find files that I want. and then of course I can go back to where I was, or I could click on computer in the shortcut section to go back even faster. So that's pretty much the Explorer section. Now the reason that I wanted you to be in the computer section of Windows Explorer and not in the libraries is because I want to talk about these C, D, A, these things right here and what they are. Now you may have heard people talking about these before in a bunch of different terms. Some people may have called this the C disk, or the C drive, or the C partition. I just want to cover what each of those different things means, and you know, what the correct term is. So you may have heard the term hard drive before, like an external hard drive or a computer hard drive or something like that. When you're talking about a hard drive, you're actually talking about the physical piece of equipment that all of your data is stored on and all of your files are stored on. So a lot of you probably have seen external hard drives before that you plug into your computer via USB. Inside of your computer, you've got another thing that's called a hard drive that works in the exact same way. Now, the problem with a hard drive is that when you get a hard drive, it might be, say, a 500 gigabyte hard drive or a 1 terabyte hard drive or something like that. When you put one of those hard drives inside of your computer, you can either put that hard drive in your computer and you can choose to just say, yep, I'm gonna, you know, just leave this as a 500 gigabyte hard drive and have all of that data stored in one location. What you can also do is choose to say, no, you know what, I've got this one hard drive, but I want to split all of the data on this hard drive. So I want to have a 200 gig partition and a 300 gig partition to make up the total 500 gigs. Those partitions, when you create them, are going to be given letters in Windows to sort of describe them. So you might have a C partition and a D partition and an E partition, etc., etc. That's why partition is technically the correct name for them. Finally, you're going to hear the term disk. Now, disk itself can be a bit of a confusing term. A disk can mean so many different things. A disk could mean a hard drive, it could mean a partition, it could mean a CD drive, it could mean a CD itself, as in a CD disk or a compact disk. So, although disk is also technically a correct term, it can be a bit confusing. Now, what you call them doesn't really matter too much. It's really just down to personal preference, and anyone that you talk to who knows anything about computers is going to understand what you're talking about, whether you say C partition or C drive or C disk anyway. So it's not too big of a deal. I just wanted to sort of cover off all those terms in case you've heard them before and you're a bit confused by them. Next up, what I wanted to talk about was the libraries. So libraries are places that you can borrow books from. I've heard nowadays that they're also allowing you to borrow DVDs and magazines. They've got internet access as well. Of course, I'm just kidding. That was a lame joke, and I will never try that again. Really, libraries are these things right here. So, by default, Windows gives you a documents library, a music library, pictures library, and a videos library. These libraries are essentially just folders on your computer, but they've just been given fancy titles to sort of suggest what kind of files you're going to find in them. Really, you could put, you know, music inside the documents library if you wanted to, or you could put pictures inside the music library. Windows is not going to stop you from doing any of those things. It's more just for organizational purposes. It is suggested that you put music in the music library and pictures in the pictures library and so on and so on. That's pretty much how they work. Alright, so we're done inside of Windows Explorer for now. So it's safe for you guys to click the X in the top button, in the top right hand corner, to close that for now. And then what I want you to do is, do you remember the charms menu and how to bring it up, put your mouse in the bottom left hand corner and then go up and click on settings. Now you'll see here that the menu changes. What I want you to click on next is control panel, and this will bring up the control panel. So your control panel may look a bit different to mine. Now the reason that is because the control panel has a bunch of different views. Those views can be changed by clicking on the little drop down here up next to view by. So there's 3 different views really inside of the control panel. There's the category view, the large icons view, and the small icons view. Right now I'm on the large icons view. Now the only difference between the large icons and the small icons view is the size of the icons that you're given. The category view is completely different, however. That gives you all of those same options that you'd see in the large icons and the small icons menu, but it's going to group them into a bunch of different categories. Some people who are fairly new to computers tend to find the category view a lot easier to navigate, but anyone who's a bit of an old school user like myself, who was used to Windows before they had this category view, usually tends to prefer the large icons view or the small icons view. Me personally, I prefer the large icons view. Now the control panel, what it's there for is the control panel gives you a bunch of different settings and options that let you change how things look and how things work on your computer. I'm not going to go over all of the control panel options in detail now because there's frankly so many of them and there's so many different ways that they can be used, and it will confuse the heck out of you. But I just wanted you to know where the control panel is, because throughout the coming lessons you will be spending a lot of time in control panel and you will be changing a lot of settings in here. So just keep it in the back of your mind of where it is and work out which view you like the most. When I do cover how to change something in the control panel, I will talk about it in both the category view and in the large icons or small icons view. So don't worry too much about that. Just whichever one's more comfortable for you to use, choose that, and we'll cover these sort of things in a lot more detail in the future. Alright, let's close that for now. Okay, so now I wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about programs or applications or software. These are all names for the same sort of thing. Basically, without programs or applications, your computer would just be a big fancy brick that sits on your desk. Things like the calculator or Microsoft Word or Microsoft Outlook, or even your web browser, which I'll be talking about in a bit more detail shortly, are programs. They are things on your computer that allow you to do things, basically. Now, the reason that I want to talk about web browsers in particular is because nowadays most things that you do on your computer can be done through a web browser. I know that when I turn on my computer, pretty much the first thing that I open up always is my web browser. Most people nowadays jump on their web browser to access Facebook or YouTube, or to hopefully, access this website. So there are a whole bunch of different web browsers out there in the world. The most common 4 that people use are Internet Explorer, which is installed by default in Windows 8, unless you live in certain parts of the world, like certain parts of Europe. Mozilla Firefox, Google Chrome, and Opera. Those are the 4 main ones that I know of that people use. Now, anyone who works in IT will tell you that Internet Explorer is a pretty bad web browser overall, and I usually tend to agree. But if you that's what you use, you don't use anything else at the moment, that's fine. Keep using Internet Explorer for now. Later on in the future, once you get more comfortable using a computer and get comfortable installing programs, you might be able to check out some of the other ones. I personally use Mozilla Firefox. That's what I like, but I know everyone has their own opinions on web browsers. So yeah, that's really all that I wanted to say on programs or applications themselves. Now, the very last topic that I wanted to cover in this lesson is keyboard shortcuts. I'm going to include a list of common Windows keyboard shortcuts in the additional reading section, and I'm not going to go over all of them because there are literally keyboard shortcuts for almost anything that you would want to do in Windows or in any of the programs or applications that you use. There are two that I wanted to cover in particular though, and they are copying and pasting. So first up, let's open up the Windows Explorer again. And for now, I want you to go to the Pictures folder. So, copying and pasting, if you learn the keyboard shortcuts for those, they will literally save your life. Like, I am not joking. They will save you so much time that you could be doing with other things in your life that I consider them to save your life. So I want to go through a demo of copying and pasting files. Now, if you've been using your computer for a while, you've probably got a lot more sort of pictures in this folder than what I do, which is nothing at the moment. But just in case you don't have anything in here, I'll just show you how to quickly create a new file just so that we can copy and paste that file and practice the keyboard shortcuts. So if you right click anywhere on the blank space in this window and then go down to New and choose Bitmap Image, it'll create a new image. It'll be a blank image, there won't be anything in there, but it's a new image. So you can give that whatever name you want. I'm just going to stick to the default new bitmap image, and then you can hit enter and it'll create that file for you. So now what you need to do is, if it's not already highlighted, just click on it at once and it will highlight it. And then what I want you to do is hit the Control key and the C key on your keyboard. So hold the Control key down and then hit the C key once. Once you've done that, you can release those keys and the file will be copied. You won't get any prompt in the screen telling you that it's copied, but if you've done it right, it will be copied. So the whole concept of copying and pasting, think of it, think of copying as if you've made a photocopy of a document that you have. When you're copying it, you've made that copy and you've picked up that copy, but you're still holding it in your hand. You need the computer. It's the same thing. When you've created a copy of a file, your computer has created that copy, but it's still holding it somewhere in its memory. It hasn't actually put that copy anywhere yet. You need to tell your computer where you want to copy it to. So go over to the Documents folder now, and then what you're going to do is you're going to paste that document down. Pasting is basically the same as, if you're still holding that piece of paper, pasting is putting that piece of paper down on your desk. So pasting in a computer is the same thing. Your computer's holding that copy of the file that you've made, and when you do the paste shortcut, it's going to tell your computer that you want to place that copy down in this new location. So once you've got this Documents folder open, just click on any of the blank space on the window, just to make sure that you're not highlighting any folders or anything like that, and then hold the Control key down again and hit the V key, V for Victor, which is right next to the C key on your keyboard. Now if you've done it right, it will place a file, a copy of that file in this Documents folder, new bitmap image. If we go back to Pictures, we'll see the original one's still there, but in Documents we have a new copy of that exact same file. If you've got a lot more files in your Documents folder than what I do, you might have to scroll through the list and search for that new file. It might be at the bottom, but if you've done it right, it should be there. So that's the copy and paste keyboard shortcuts. Those, I feel, are the two most important keyboard shortcuts that anyone should know. They will literally save you so much time, and you will probably use those keyboard shortcuts more than any other keyboard shortcut that you use on your computer. I know I do. And the copy and paste keyboard shortcuts, they work pretty much the same in any application that you use. They work the same for files, for text, for, you know, anything really. It's just like a common shortcut that everyone uses. Alright, so you can close that down now. And that's pretty much the end of the lesson. So we'll just head back over to my PowerPoint slides that I had open before, and we'll go through the summary, and that will be pretty much it. Alright, I know this has been a fairly long lesson and it may have been overwhelming for some of you, but hopefully you all learnt something from it and it wasn't too difficult. But we'll just summarize everything now to ingrain the information in your head a little bit more. So, the start menu. It's the first thing that you see when you turn your computer on. One of the new features in the start menu is the live tiles, which update with live information for whatever program that tile is for. And the search function works by pretty much typing in something on your keyboard, and the search box will bring up a bunch of programs that relate to whatever you type. The desktop is made up of two parts. There's the desktop background, which is your wallpaper, which is a picture of anything that you really want to have as your desktop background, and the desktop icons, which are just icons to access your applications that you frequently use. Along the bottom of your screen, by default, there's a bar called the Taskbar. On this bar you'll find icons for any programs that you have open, and the system tray, which has your clock and a bunch of other little icons for applications that are running in the background. Windows Explorer, or computer, has three different sections. The navigation section, which runs along the top, the shortcut section, which runs along the left hand side, and the Explorer window, which is the main part of the window that you'll be using. It's the gateway to access all of the files and folders on your computer. You know, if you're going to be searching for anything on your computer, you're probably going to be doing it through Windows Explorer. Disks and partitions. Partitions is the most appropriate name for those C, D, E, F, G things that you see in the computer screen. You can also call them hard drives or disks. It's not the most accurate term, but most people will understand what you're talking about. Libraries are specialized folders designed for storing certain file types. So as we saw, there's the documents, the library, the music, pictures, videos. You obviously put whatever type of files you think should go in those particular libraries. The control panel, it contains a number of different settings for customizing your computer. There's three different views. There's the category view, large icons and small icons view. Use whichever view you think works the best for you. I personally prefer the large icons view, but I'll cover all three views when I do my tutorials in the future. Programs and applications, they allow you to do stuff on your computer. That's basically the most simple way to put it. A web browser is an example of a program. Keyboard shortcuts. Each program has its own different keyboard shortcuts. Windows has its own, which I'll be linking to in the additional reading section. The copy and paste keyboard shortcuts are the two most important to know, and they work across almost all programs. Control C is the keyboard shortcut for copying, and Control V is the keyboard shortcut for pasting. Alright, so that's pretty much it. The lesson on the basics of Windows 8 is done and dusted. If you want more, check out knowledgescavenger.com. Subscribe to my YouTube channel and you'll be updated whenever there's new videos posted. If there's any questions that you have, you can either email me at nathan@knowledgescavenger.com, or you can leave some comments below the post on the website. Alright guys, thanks. That's it. We're all done for this lesson. I'll see you guys next time.